Hidden deep within the woods, surrounded by a thick wall of thorny vines, lay the Forbidden Garden, a place shrouded in mystery and fear. The townsfolk whispered stories of its deadly allure, warning anyone who dared to venture near. It was said that the garden was cursed, filled with poisonous plants and creatures so dangerous that none who entered ever returned. The rumors were enough to keep most people away, but for a group of curious teenagers, it was the ultimate challenge. One crisp autumn afternoon, 5 friends, Samantha, Jake, Emily, Max, and Lily, decided to explore the garden. They had heard the tales growing up, but they dismissed them as nothing more than local superstition. Armed with flashlights and a thirst for adventure, they set off into the woods, their laughter echoing through the trees. As they approached the garden, the atmosphere grew tense. The once clear sky darkened, and the air became heavy with the scent of decay. The entrance to the garden was overgrown with thick, black vines that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Ignoring the uneasy feeling gnawing at their stomachs, they pushed through the tangled barrier and stepped inside. The garden was unlike anything they had ever seen. Twisted trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The ground was covered in a dense carpet of strange, colorful plants that glowed faintly in the dim light. But as beautiful as it was, there was something undeniably wrong about the place. The air was thick with the sickly sweet scent of rotting flowers, and the silence was oppressive. As they ventured deeper, the plants became more grotesque. Some had leaves that dripped with a viscous, black sap, while others had thorns the size of knives. They came across a patch of vibrant red flowers, their petals curling inward like claws. Curious, Lily reached out to touch one, but Jake grabbed her hand just in time. "Don't," he warned. "We don't know what these things can do." They continued on, but the sense of dread only grew stronger. The deeper they went, the more they realized they were not alone. Strange shadows flitted through the trees, and the rustling of leaves sounded more like the slithering of something far more sinister. Suddenly, Emily screamed. The others rushed to her side and found her staring in horror at a large plant that had latched onto her leg. Its tendrils were wrapped tightly around her ankle, and the skin where it touched was already turning black. Max tried to pull it off, but the plant only tightened its grip, sinking sharp thorns into her flesh. Panic set in as they realized the garden was alive, and it was hungry. The plants began to move, their vines snaking across the ground toward the terrified teenagers. One by one, the group was separated in the chaos. Max was dragged into a pit of snapping, carnivorous plants, his screams quickly silenced. Lily stumbled into a nest of venomous spiders, their glowing eyes reflecting her terror as they closed in. Jake tried to climb a tree to escape, but the branches coiled around him like serpents, crushing the life out of him. Samantha, the last of the group, ran blindly through the garden, the cries of her friends echoing in her ears. She tripped and fell into a clearing, where a massive, ancient tree stood in the center. Its bark was twisted and blackened, with deep scars that oozed a dark, tar-like substance. The ground around it was littered with bones, both animal and human, all picked clean. She barely had time to react before the tree's roots shot out of the ground, wrapping around her body and pulling her toward the base. The last thing she saw before darkness consumed her was the twisted face of the tree, its hollow eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Days later, when the teenagers failed to return home, their families alerted the authorities. A search party was organized, and they scoured the woods, but no trace of the group was ever found. The entrance to the Forbidden Garden had vanished, leaving only an impenetrable wall of thorns where it once stood. The townspeople continued to tell stories of the garden, warning others to stay away. But the legend only grew with time, and the truth of what happened to the 5 teenagers remained buried within the garden's cursed soil, where the plants and creatures thrived, feeding on the souls of the lost. And so, the Forbidden Garden remains, a place of horror and death, where those who enter are never seen again.